Have you ever been praised as the best in the world, only to be torn apart for the very body that made you great? Katelyn Ohashi was a gymnastics prodigy. She had the power, the grace, the goal. But behind the perfect routines and dazzling smiles was a storm of criticism, judgment, and body shaming that crushed her spirit. They didn't see her strength. They saw her size. They didn't cheer her effort. They measured her worth by numbers on a scale. She went from standing on the world stage to questioning her reflection in the mirror, from being celebrated to being broken. But what if I told you this fall became her rise? This is not just a story about quitting gymnastics. It's about reclaiming joy, healing from pain, and redefining beauty on her terms. Because sometimes walking away from what breaks you is the most powerful victory of all. In the world of competitive sports, perfection is not just a goal. It becomes an identity. Every movement, every expression, every score is measured against a standard that demands flawlessness. Athletes are taught to chase excellence, but what often goes unnoticed is the emotional weight that comes with it. The pressure to perform is constant, and it doesn't end when the competition does. It follows them into their thoughts, their meals, their sleep, and even their sense of self. When the world is watching, one slip can feel like failure, and one missed landing can overshadow years of sacrifice. The drive for perfection is powerful, but it can also be destructive, especially when public image becomes more important than personal well-being. In gymnastics, where grace and control are everything, the expectation of perfection becomes suffocating. Every routine is not just judged for skill, but for appearance, body shape, and composure. Athletes like Katelyn Ohashi found themselves trapped between loving their sport and hating what it demanded from them. The judges' scores are one kind of judgment, but the public's comments, the media's comparisons, and the online scrutiny create another arena of pressure. The image of the perfect gymnast leaves no room for flaws, fatigue, or individuality. The very sport that once inspired joy begins to consume the athlete's identity, leaving them feeling like their worth depends solely on their performance. The mental and emotional toll of maintaining this public image can be devastating. Many athletes learn to hide pain behind smiles, to silence their struggles for fear of being seen as weak. The fear of disappointing coaches, fans, and even family becomes heavier than the medals they win. Every achievement is followed by a question. How can I be better, thinner, faster, stronger? It's a cycle that feeds on itself, pushing athletes to the brink of exhaustion. The body becomes a tool, and the person inside begins to disappear. Social media has only intensified this pressure. Every performance is replayed, analyzed, and criticized by millions of viewers who know nothing of the discipline and pain behind the scenes. The athlete's body becomes public property, open to opinions and comparisons. The beauty of sport, which should be about passion and perseverance, becomes clouded by judgment and unrealistic expectations. The pursuit of perfection transforms into an endless battle with self-image and identity. Katelyn Ohashi's story reveals how even the most gifted athletes can break under this invisible weight. The world celebrated her talent, but ignored the quiet damage being done to her confidence and joy. She was expected to be the best version of what others wanted her to be, not the best version of herself. The pressure of perfection robbed her of peace and replaced it with anxiety, forcing her to question whether excellence was worth the cost. The audience saw gold medals and flawless routines, but they didn't see the pain behind the precision, the tears behind the applause, or the loneliness that perfection often hides. Body shaming strikes at the very core of a person's identity, turning what should be a source of strength into a reason for doubt and pain. For athletes like Katelyn Ohashi, whose bodies are both their tools and their art, every comment and criticism cuts deeper than most can imagine. When people begin to equate physical appearance with value, the mind starts to internalize those judgments, creating a distorted image of self-worth. What once felt like pride and hard work becomes shame and imperfection. Every glance in the mirror becomes a test, and every meal becomes a calculation of guilt. The emotional toll of being told that you are not enough, not thin enough, not toned enough, not perfect enough, slowly erodes confidence and joy, replacing them with anxiety and self-hatred that can linger long after the applause fades. In the competitive world of gymnastics, body image is not just a topic, it's an unspoken rule that dictates acceptance. Coaches, judges, and even fans create an environment where an athlete's worth is often tied to how they look in their leotard, rather than how they perform on the mat. This constant evaluation creates a mental battlefield where the body becomes an enemy instead of a partner. Katelyn Ohashi, once celebrated for her incredible talent, found herself crushed by whispers about her weight and body type. The very body that allowed her to achieve greatness was suddenly labeled as too much. The contradiction was unbearable. How could she be powerful yet criticized for the form that carried her strength? The confusion leads to shame, and shame breeds silence. Over time, body shaming seeps into every layer of a person's being. It shifts focus from performance to appearance, from passion to perfectionism. The mind begins to replay every comment like a broken record, making it impossible to feel proud of one's own reflection. Even success becomes tainted, as the joy of achievement is overshadowed by the fear of judgment. For many, this cycle leads to isolation, pulling away from the very things that once brought happiness. It's not just the physical comments that hurt, it's the invisible message behind them. The suggestion that love and respect must be earned through appearance. The emotional damage does not end in the gym or the stadium. It follows athletes home, into quiet moments where they question their worth without the validation of a crowd. The internal dialogue becomes cruel, echoing the voices of critics and magnifying insecurities. The pain of body shaming doesn't fade easily because it attacks something deeply human, the desire to be accepted and seen as enough. Katelyn's struggle reflected this reality. She wasn't battling just the expectations of a sport. She was battling the expectations of a society obsessed with image. Body shaming stripped away the joy that once defined her and replaced it with the constant need to justify her existence. It taught her to hide her light instead of celebrating it, to seek approval instead of peace, to perform for acceptance instead of self-love. Success is often seen as the ultimate proof of happiness, confidence, and fulfillment. But behind many shining victories lie silent struggles that no one sees. The spotlight can be deceiving, casting a glow so bright that it blinds others from the pain hidden behind the performance. For someone like Katelyn Ohashi, success became both a blessing and a burden. To the world, she was a symbol of talent, grace, and perfection, a gymnast who had achieved what most could only dream of. But beneath the medals and applause, there was exhaustion, pressure, and an aching sense of emptiness. The world celebrated her victories, but never asked if she was okay. Success became a mask she wore, smiling for the cameras while her heart quietly battled loneliness and self-doubt. In the world of competitive sports, struggle is often dismissed as weakness. Athletes are trained to push through pain, to perform no matter how they feel. They learn to suppress emotions, to keep smiling even when they're breaking inside. Success demands consistency, and consistency demands silence. There is no space to admit fear, burnout, or insecurity when everyone expects perfection. The cheers from the audience can feel like chains, holding an athlete to an image that doesn't reflect their reality. The more successful they become, the harder it is to be honest about their pain. People see the glory, but never the sacrifice. The tears behind the scenes, the sleepless nights, the voices of self-criticism that grow louder with every new achievement. Katelyn's story reflects how success can create isolation. The more recognition she received, the more she felt trapped by expectation. The world only wanted the winning version of her, not the human one. Every smile had to be flawless, every move graceful, every emotion controlled. But success without peace becomes an empty performance. The more she achieved, the more she realized that approval from others could not fill the void within. It became easier to play the role of the confident athlete than to admit the truth of her struggles. The applause drowned out her pain, but only temporarily. When the lights went out and the crowd disappeared, the silence that followed was louder than anything she had ever heard. The hidden struggle behind success is not rare. It is common among those who dedicate their lives to excellence. Society glorifies results, but rarely acknowledges the cost. The mental battles, the fear of failure, and the constant need to prove one's worth create an invisible pressure that builds until it breaks something inside. For Katelyn, Her body and mind carried the weight of unrealistic standards, and no medal could make that weight disappear. Success had become her identity, yet it left her disconnected from her true self. The world's admiration could not heal the unseen wounds. The truth is, success can hide more pain than failure ever could. Because when everyone believes you are living your dream, no one stops to see that you might be living your nightmare in silence. Walking away from something that once defined you takes immense courage, especially when the world expects you to stay. For Katelyn Ohashi, stepping away from gymnastics wasn't about quitting. It was about survival. The sport that once gave her joy had turned into a prison of perfection, criticism, and endless judgment. Every move, every word, every appearance was scrutinized until she no longer recognized herself. She realized that no matter how much she gave, it was never enough. The expectations placed on her were not about her growth or happiness. They were about maintaining an image that served others. It takes courage to recognize when success has become suffocating, and even more to walk away from it in search of peace. Toxic expectations can come from all directions: coaches, fans, family, and even the inner voice that whispers you must always do more. They promise validation but demand sacrifice. They make people believe that worth depends on constant achievement and rest is weakness. Katelyn had spent years performing under these expectations, trying to meet standards that kept shifting. She learned to ignore her body's pain, to silence her emotions, and to smile through exhaustion. But deep down, she began to understand that the price she was paying was her own joy. To walk away meant disappointing others, but staying meant losing herself completely. The choice between their approval and her healing became clear. The courage to walk away is not born out of rebellion, but out of awakening. It is realizing that no applause can replace peace of mind, and no title can heal a wounded heart. Katelyn's decision to the world of elite gymnastics was an act of reclaiming her life. She chose to break free from the cycle of expectations that demanded perfection, but offered no compassion. It was a declaration that her worth did not depend on medals or scores, but on her ability to love herself without conditions. Walking away meant facing the unknown, but it also meant stepping into freedom. The freedom to rediscover joy, to rebuild identity, and to live without the constant fear of judgment. The world often glorifies endurance, but rarely honors the bravery it takes to stop. People admire those who push through pain, but struggle to understand those who choose peace over performance. Katelyn's story shattered that illusion. She showed that walking away does not mean giving up. It means choosing yourself over the voices that try to define you. It means daring to say no to what hurts, even when everyone else expects you to say. True courage is not found in holding on. It's found in letting go of what no longer aligns with your spirit. Katelyn's decision to step back was an act of strength disguised as surrender, a moment where she chose authenticity over approval, healing over pressure, and freedom over fear. Rediscovering joy and purpose beyond external validation begins with the painful realization that applause fades, opinions change, and approval can never fill the emptiness left by self-neglect. For Katelyn Ohashi, this realization marked the beginning of a new chapter. After years of performing for scores, judges, and expectations, she reached a point where she no longer wanted to be defined by numbers or approval. She wanted to feel alive again, to move because it brought her happiness, not because it earned her praise. When she stepped away from elite competition, she stepped toward herself. In that space of quiet and reflection, she began to understand that true joy isn't found in perfection. It's found in presence. The moment she stopped chasing validation, she started rediscovering who she was beneath the uniform, the medals, and the pressure. External validation is addictive because it gives temporary relief. Each compliment, each cheer, each award feels like proof of worth. But the danger lies in dependence. When a person's identity becomes tied to approval, silence feels like rejection. Katelyn had lived in that cycle for years. Every success brought a brief high, followed by fear of losing it. She learned that joy built on validation is fragile, easily shattered by criticism or failure. It took courage to let go of that need and seek something deeper. She began to reconnect with the simple, unmeasured love of movement, the laughter, the freedom, the creativity that first drew her to gymnastics. Her routines became expressions of emotion rather than performances of perfection. The joy that once felt lost began to return, this time rooted not in how others saw her, but in how she felt about herself. Rediscovering purpose beyond validation means embracing imperfection as part of the journey. It means realizing that fulfillment comes from doing something because it resonates with your soul, not because it impresses others. Katelyn began to use her voice to inspire others who struggled with the same pressure she once faced. Through her story, she turned pain into purpose, showing that self-worth does not depend on public approval, but on personal truth. The joy she found was not loud or flashy. It was quiet, steady, and real. It was the kind of joy that comes from acceptance, from being at peace with one's flaws and strengths alike. When external validation no longer dictates identity, life opens up in new ways. There is space to breathe, to fail without fear, to grow without constant comparison. Katelyn's journey became a reminder that purpose is not given by others. It is discovered within. She learned that the applause of others can motivate, but it can never define. True fulfillment begins when a person chooses authenticity over acceptance, process over perfection, and meaning over measurement. Joy returns when the heart is free to simply be. Purpose shines brightest when it is guided by love rather than judgment. Turning pain into empowerment and self-acceptance begins with acknowledging the wounds that once silenced you. For Katelyn Ohashi, pain had been a constant companion. Pain from judgment, from expectations, and from the weight of never feeling enough. But pain, when faced with honesty, can become a powerful teacher. It reveals the places that need healing and the truths that have been buried beneath years of trying to please others. Katelyn's journey was not about erasing the hurt. It was about transforming it into strength. She chose to confront the very experiences that once broke her and to use them as fuel for growth. The same pain that once made her question her worth became the foundation of her empowerment. Through vulnerability, she discovered that strength is not the absence of suffering, but the ability to rise despite it. The process of transformation begins when pain is no longer seen as an enemy, but as a guide. Every criticism, every setback, every tear shed in silence became part of Katelyn's evolution. She stopped asking why it happened and started asking what it could teach her. In that shift, pain lost its power to destroy and began to build resilience instead. Empowerment came from reclaiming her story, from refusing to let the opinions of others define her value. She realized that she didn't need to be perfect to be powerful. Her imperfections were not flaws to be hidden, but truths to be embraced. When she began to speak openly about her struggles, she not only freed herself, but also gave permission for others to do the same. That act of honesty turned pain into purpose and purpose into empowerment. Self-acceptance often grows in the soil of past pain. It is not instant, and it is not easy. It takes time to look in the mirror and see beauty in what was once criticized, to see strength in what was once doubted. Katelyn learned to appreciate her body not for how it looked, but for what it allowed her to do. She found grace in movement again, not as a performance, but as a celebration of self-expression. The body she once felt pressured to change became a symbol of freedom and authenticity. She began to love herself for who she was, not for what others wanted her to be. This acceptance did not erase the scars of the past, but it transformed them into reminders of survival, courage, and growth. When pain is transformed, it becomes a source of power that no one can take away. Empowerment and self-acceptance are not final destinations, but continuous choices to rise, to forgive, to love, and to live without apology. Katelyn's journey shows that even the deepest wounds can become gateways to strength when met with compassion. The same pain that once silenced her became the very force that helped her find her voice, teaching her that true beauty lies not in perfection, but in the courage to embrace every part of who you are. Katelyn Ohashi's story is more than a tale of a gymnast. It is a reflection of every person who has ever felt crushed under the weight of expectations, judged for how they look, or silenced by the fear of not being enough. Her journey reminds the world that perfection is not the measure of greatness. Authenticity is. She showed that success means nothing if it costs your peace, and applause loses its meaning if you cannot hear your own voice beneath it. The moment she chose to walk away from the standards that broke her, she walked into a freedom, far more powerful than any medal could offer. Her courage to face pain, confront shame, and rebuild from within transformed her story from one of pressure to one of purpose. By letting go of toxic validation, she rediscovered joy, the kind that cannot be scored, judged, or compared. Through her vulnerability, she became a light for others who struggle in silence, proving that our greatest strength often emerges from our deepest wounds. Katelyn's journey is a call to everyone chasing approval to pause and remember that worth is not earned. It is inherent. In reclaiming her identity, she taught that walking away does not mean failure. It means choosing yourself. She turned her pain into empowerment, her struggle into strength, and her voice into a message of healing. Her story reminds us that true victory is not found on a podium, but in the quiet peace of self-acceptance, where joy flows freely and purpose is no longer dictated by the world, but defined by the heart.